Okay, good evening, Conversation 1. This is Professor Sullivan, and I desperately need a haircut, as you can see. This is week 8. Here we are again. Today we're going to talk about Chapter 7. Before we go ahead with my favorite things, I have the beginning of the song here. These are a few of my favorite things. There will be a couple links on the website for you to check out, along with this video lecture when I post this later tonight. Before we go on, first of all, this weekend is our second makeup weekend, so there will be a makeup lecture that is uploaded on Friday, which you need to log in and watch Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Okay? So don't forget to do that. This is for both Conversation 1 classes. So that will be the next chapter in the book, Chapter 8. Then next week on Tuesday, which is our normal class day, there is a holiday. It's Children's Day, which, I mean, normally you go to an amusement park if you have kids, and if if you are not a kid, if you're a university student, you just get the day off and you do whatever you want. Maybe you go see your parents, or your parents get you something still, but probably not. This is for parents and their children to do stuff. You know how it works. But we don't need to worry about that because our lectures are done weekly. So if you don't feel like logging in next Tuesday, don't. That I don't mind, as usual. But we will just do our lecture as we normally would, and then we don't have to worry about making that lecture up at the end of the semester on a designated day on a certain, I think it's the Tuesday at the end of the semester. We're just going to ignore that. So just business as usual next week, even though there's a holiday on our designated day. But yeah, as I've said before, is it Monday? Is it Tuesday? Is it Saturday? I don't really know. All I know is this is Conversation 1. So what we're going to talk about today is a few of my favorite things. I've actually decided to use my board today, which was, a nice little purchase that I made and kind of hung from a children's set of history books with a shoelace. And you can see one of the things that I love to collect, because a lot of the textbook is talking about collections of things. In the list there, it does not include books, which is kind of shocking because, books are one of the things that professors, students, people in general have collected for ages and ages. And, we think of books as just something that's just printed in a print shop, in a factory, slapped together. You pay a bunch of money for it, and then you beat it up, you read it, and you beat it up, and you throw it in the garbage, and it doesn't last very long. But I actually had the pleasure and the opportunity to see an original book of hours. My university has a humanities library, a library dedicated to English literature. Well, not English literature, dedicated, it's in English, most of it, but it's dedicated to the humanities college, to the faculty of humanities, rather. And the whole library is philosophy, history, English, languages, etc. All the subjects that belong to humanities. In the basement, there is, a controlled temperature environment where they have an archive where they keep their really old books. And one of my professors, when I took my middle English class, one of my professors brought me and a few other students down there, and she took out this book. It's called A Book of Hours. It's basically a prayer book that was made about 600 years ago. She took it out, and this is not a book in the sense of like something mass produced and and printed on cheap material. This is, a book that's basically made from the lining of a calf's stomach or something. It's basically made of, the pages are made of kind of whitish leather. It's pretty remarkably strong considering how old it was. And you have to wear gloves and everything, and you can touch it and you can look at it. And there's, each letter was written by a monk, one letter at a time, and it just looks, it's beautiful. It's art, and it's like it's carved, and it's perfect. Each line is written carefully, and in the margins there's all these beautiful, there's angels and horns and sheep and shepherds and all kinds of designs surrounding, and some of them, the pages weren't complete actually, because this book took somebody, I don't know, every day for 3 years or something, and they never quite finished what they were doing. But it was gold inlaid, and it was handwritten and very carefully on the most expensive material. If you had a book like that, you wouldn't throw it out. Like this is like the family treasure. If you had a book like that, you protect it with your life. And some of the books, you can't imagine ever sacrificing your life, right? But there was an Irish monk that was running away from Vikings or something in the early Middle Ages, and threw a book called the Book of Kell, if I'm not mistaken, threw it away desperately in trying to prevent the Vikings from burning the book or stealing it or destroying it. And we have that book still exists. It's one of the treasures of the Middle Ages that Ireland possesses. So books, yeah, you can see I love books. The digital books just don't. I read all the time. I read the internet and everything. But if I really like a book, then I buy it. And those of you who are taking British and American culture, there you go, right? That's a hardcover book. That's not a cheap book. And you can see there's the bookmarks in it where I was reading to research my material for that class. This is my small library, my small personal library. A lot of people have them. This is what a collection is. And I have 2 children, and when I have a daughter, and she took one of my books out, and she ripped a page out and colored in a book, and I have to say I was overreacted a little bit. I think that's the way you can, one of the ways that you can tell that somebody considers something that they collect very important is if you touch it, the person freaks out, right? And she's only 3, she's 2 and something. She's almost 3 years old, but I lost it. And I said, never touch any of my books ever again. Because that's how much I love my books. Not these ones. These ones are kids' books. These ones, the ones that cost a lot of money, and I try to keep them in good condition. So this is the topic. You can talk about any collection you want. You can talk about anything that's your favorite thing. It doesn't. I don't want you to talk about your favorite food, though. For example, I would like you to talk about something a little bit more persistent, something a little bit more durable. Okay, so yeah, I know food is something that everybody loves. It's one of my favorite things too, but you can't collect food unless you can. I guess you can if you have a lot of expensive cheeses that are really old, then I guess that's okay. But you can't collect fried chicken because it'll be pretty disgusting very quickly. So it doesn't have to necessarily be a collection, but it has to be something that you really like, that you can possess for a while. Okay. And I want you to talk about this thing, and I want you to think about, we're halfway through the class, and normally we would have a midterm right now, but we we can't. So the midterm is canceled. And I'm going to give you your feedback. I promised that already. I haven't got to your class yet, or your classes, but the feedback is on its way. And one of the things, the grade policy is relaxed, so you don't have to be stressed out about competing for A's as much as usual, because normally only 30% of the class would be able to get an A. But the good news is that this semester the university has allowed us to give 50% of you an A. So I'm not saying you don't need to work hard. I'm saying you should work hard, but just don't be stressed out as much as you normally would. So you still need to push yourself. If you want to do well, and I think this is a good group of freshmen. I have no idea what you look like. I've never met any of you, but there's been lots of good questions. Emails have generally been on time. You've followed the instructions. I think it's a smart group of students. We usually do have a good group, but I think it's particularly difficult for you, freshmen who have never been to university and experienced what it's really like, but you're doing a very good job. And I want you to challenge yourself, even though I'm not in front of you, saying to you to your face, please study harder. I know you're a freshman and you want to party and you want to meet your friends and you want to socialize, and you can't really right now. So since you can't, I mean, we're doing pretty well in Korea, so maybe you will get to really soon. I hope so. But since you have all this free time and you're stuck at home a lot, please study English more, okay? And challenge yourself to be better. So now I'm going to talk about a couple of ways that you can push yourself to that next level, right? When you talk about something and you want to you want to challenge yourself and you want to improve your thought process and your analytical ability, what do you have to do? Well, in English language and literature, and in my case, I teach cultural studies a lot and business English as well. You have to think more carefully. You have to think more deeply about each topic, not just superficially on the surface discuss what you think. So I can tell you I love buttons, which I don't, but if I did, I like really exotic buttons from different countries with all these different colors and designs by all these, and old buttons and new buttons and fancy shiny ones or whatever. I can say all those details, which is great. You can describe that. But really, you can go farther into the topic than just talking about what the buttons look like and how they're attractive to them. Maybe there's something more to your interest in buttons. So I just randomly chose this topic by accident, but I'll run with it. One of my students, and this is a weird thing to know, but one of my students a few years ago told me that French people in the 18th century, 17th century, 18th century became so fashionable, and everybody knows French people are fashionable in general, but you know what I mean. The height of French, Louis XIV was the king of France. Just follow me for a second here. I know it sounds like I'm off topic, but I'm not. Louis XIV was called the Sun King. So European culture really revolved around him. He was the center of the European galaxy, solar system, if you will. And culturally, it revolved around him. Militarily, politically, culturally, Louis XIV was the center of European culture. And everybody tried to imitate what happened in his court. And lots of things happened, and it continued like that. And up until this today, all the French brands, fashionable things that Koreans love and everybody else too, Chanel and Louis Vuitton and everything else, right? That's hundreds of years old, and the Italian stuff is hundreds of years old too. The French people got to the point where people were wealthy enough and conscious enough of their fashion that they would have these incredibly intricate, beautiful handmade buttons of expensive material, gold and silver and everything, and they had pictures on them and certain signatures on them and stuff like that. And people just, got these expensive buttons and loved them, and they wore as many as possible. And I didn't look this up, but I can't remember exactly how many buttons it was, but people started to wear so many buttons that they actually made basically a restriction, the same way that you have to wear a middle school uniform, or you have to cut your hair a certain length when you go to school. They made, you were not allowed to wear, I'm going to say it was 24 buttons, I'm probably wrong, but it's something like that. You could only have a maximum of 24 buttons, because these people got so obsessed with buttons that they would wear, I don't know how many buttons they started wearing, 75 buttons on their coats and their shirts. But they made this limit so that the competition for how many buttons you wore didn't get out of control. So that's the history of buttons in France. But this is what I mean. You come up with an idea or something like, I love buttons because I love French buttons. And you know something interesting about buttons? Let me tell you the story. Louis XIV, blah, 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 buttons. People got crazy about them. They actually had to make a limit because people love the buttons too much. Okay? Now, this goes along with there's these things called isms. Is my high school history teacher, when he went through different periods of Western history, he always remarked, and philosophy professors or teachers do this too, it's the isms, right? It's an idea, it's a noun, it's an idea plus ism, it's a noun that's about something abstract, usually and the isms are always a little bit more complicated to understand. Consumer is fine. Consumer is just a person who buys stuff. And consumerism is the idea of buying things. And now this is not a difficult ism, but the isms tend to stress out university students sometimes because there's a lot of them. So consumerism is essentially the idea that buying and purchasing things drives the economy. And if you're a consumerist, not a consumer, everybody's a consumer because we all buy things and we consume them. We eat them, we use them, and then we throw them away. But the consumerism, the idea is that we need to consume things and we need to consume a lot of it, which drives the exchange of goods, which promotes economic growth. And this is true. But there are negative sides to consumerism, which include waste. Now, somebody who collects things could be a consumer and could be subscribing to consumerism, but sometimes consumerism means that you buy something, and even though it's not broken or used, that you throw it away, dispose of it, waste it, break it, or replace it. All right? So, I mean, there's a downside to consumerism, and you can see that somewhat, in Korean culture, which there's sort of an obsession, I would say, today. In general, there's an obsession in Korea with new stuff. Like, I felt it when I had my kids. It's like in other places, my friends, my brother, my sister, they got used baby stuff from everyone. Like my brother didn't buy anything new, like nothing. The baby seat, the high chair, the toys, everything is. And my American buddy too, who lived in Korea before, I was just shocked that he was getting stuff for free. He was getting stuff cheaply, but that's not usually what young Korean parents want. They might do it if they have to, but ideally, they're going to buy everything brand new, and their kid is the first one to sit in it and the first one to touch it, and it's brand new and shiny and it's reliable and it's the best quality possible. That's consumerism, my friends. Minimalism is the opposite. Minimalism is even further than just not like my brother, for example, and if he watches this video, he's probably going to correct me somewhat, But generally, he just looks for things that are a good deal. Like there's nothing wrong with it. It's just been used before, right? The secondhand shop and stuff over here that I wrote is that kind of stuff. But hand-me-down things are just like, well, somebody's older than you and they used the thing, and so you're next in line. And that's how I got some clothes. My cousins were older than me, and some of my clothes came from them. And if they weren't dirty and old and damaged, then my aunt just gave them to us, and then we wore them. Why not? Well, if you're not interested in having used things, then you wouldn't be interested in secondhand or hand-me-down stuff. But a minimalist is somebody who just says, well, I only need a certain amount of shirts. Like I don't need 25 shirts. I only need 5. And I can use another example. I'm not going to name names here. And I shouldn't be saying my brother. I should just be saying somebody I know. It's better. But anyway, now this is on the internet, so that's fine. One of my friends, he lived in Korea for a while, and he only had, if I'm not mistaken, he said he only had 2 pairs of jeans. And jeans are pretty tough material. Denim is a tough material, and jeans can be worn again. You don't necessarily need to wash them every time. But he just wore one pair over and over, and you can't really tell. If some of you guys do this, you'll be laughing, and other people will be like, I think some of you students will probably be shocked and appalled that anybody would not wash their pants every day that they wear them. I'm not going to tell you what I do, but I do wash my pants every time. I only wear them once and I wash them. But I was shocked and appalled that my friend was basically wearing one pair of jeans for like 4 or 5 days and just taking them off and then changing everything else, but shirt and everything else. But the jeans would just go back on. And he only had 2 pairs. So he just washed one pair of jeans, wore it for 5 days, and the other one was getting washed and drying, and then he'd switch them. So he's basically on a 1-week rotation on his jeans, almost, at least on the weekdays. 5 days, my friends. Okay, a Packrat is not a positive thing to say about somebody. I wrote these things up here because I think idiomatic expressions are good, or contextual vocabulary is something that, a foreign professor can teach you a little bit, perhaps has an advantage to teach you over somebody who has lived in Korea and in Korean culture. No matter how well a Korean professor speaks English or talks to you about English vocabulary, they may not have as much familiarity with the vocabulary as me, having grown up and spent 25 years in Canadian culture. So a Packrat is me, but don't call somebody a Packrat, because if you look it up on Google, you will see a Packrat is actually a very ugly rat that loves to collect dirty things. So a Packrat just means somebody who doesn't want to let things go. Like, I have junk all over the place. I'm not going to turn the camera so you can see what my office looks like off the camera angle, but there's junk everywhere. I'm looking at it right now. You can see my eyes roaming around. There's masks over there. There's sanitizer. There's books. There's cleaning stuff. There's Band-Aids sitting there for some reason. There's some tables. There's some board games and a spare keyboard on top of that. I don't know what that keyboard is for. There's a monitor I never use, my printer. There's a bag of soil for planting flowers. That's what's just scattered around my office. And if you looked in my closet, you'd be terrified at what's in there. So that's what a Packrat does. They keep everything and they don't throw anything away. And that's not a good habit. I came across, there is a word, hoard. To hoard something means to keep it all for yourself. Like a dragon hoard is a pile of gold, because dragons love gold in Western culture, at least in the fantasy stories that I read. So the dragon just keeps all the gold and he sleeps on the gold, and the adventurers try and steal it from him. A hoarding just means keeping everything, being greedy and holding it for yourself. But it doesn't have to be gold. It can be anything. So I discovered when I was preparing for this lecture, actually, that in 2013, which is very recent, 7 years ago, this expression, hoarding, actually got included as a mental disorder because some people keep everything. It's normally a symptom of depression or ADHD or OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, attention deficit hyperactive disorder, or obsessive compulsive personality disorder. They're all kind of in the same, anxiety group, and these people can't let anything go, so they'll literally end up keeping garbage, like something that's actually smells bad and it's really dirty. They won't throw it out because they have to keep everything. That's what the mental disorder is like. So when you say you hoard something, it just means you're greedy and you don't want to let things go. But there's actually a very extreme situation that some people deal with, which I discovered only a couple hours ago. It's called hoarding. Okay, so now you know about that too. Flea markets. A flea market is just a bunch of used things. It's like I think these things are great. Garage selling and secondhand shops they're all related. These three things. A flea market is actually it's a place. It's a building or an open market with tents or something, and it's just a whole bunch of random stuff. Like there's just some people would just say it's a pile of junk, but there you can find. Surprisingly, you can find stuff that's really cheap. You can find really old things, and sometimes you can find stuff that's actually, it should be in a museum or something, but nobody really knows what it is. And you buy it for $10, and it ends up being worth, I should say it in Korean money, I guess. You buy something for manwon, and then you find out later that it's worth 200 manwon, right? You find something you buy it for $10, and then you figure out that it's actually 200 years old, and it's a doll that was owned by Abraham Lincoln's son when he was a kid. And that would be worth more than 2,000. That would probably be worth 50,000 Ochan Manwon. That's what happens. And I'm going to link you. There's a really, really popular show. I guess it's an old show, and I'm not even sure if it's on anymore, but there's something called Antique Roadshow, and it's just a bunch of people showing objects that they got, going around to people's houses on Saturday morning, looking at garage sales, or going to secondhand shops where things are used and they're not new, or in a flea market they buy something, or they find it in their house, or their grandparents' house when they get older. They clean out the basement or the attic, the top level of the house, and they find something really, really old and really interesting, and they wonder what it is. They take it to see an expert, and the expert says, you know what? This is a piece of garbage, actually. You should throw it out. It's not even worth $10. It should be $2, and you overpaid. Or they say the other thing, which is the exciting part, is when they say, do you know what this is? And the person's like, no, what is it? Please tell me. And you say, this is Abraham Lincoln's son's doll. And you could get $50,000 for this, easy. And the person says, oh my God. And they're rich, just like that. And that show was really popular. Actually, it was popular a long time ago when I was a university student, but its popularity continued for a long time. So I'm going to find a clip of something dramatic like that. The Abraham Lincoln's doll thing is something I made up, but I'm going to find a clip for you. So this is the topic. Again, this week I'm trying to catch up, so you don't have to hand in an assignment. But this is a topic. You have to talk about something you like. It doesn't have to be a real collection. I've been talking about collections, but it can be a single thing. I just mentioned about the Antique Roadshow. So it can just be one of your, it doesn't have to be favorite things. It can just be my favorite thing. One thing, if you want. If you want to talk about a particular thing and tell me the story about it and maybe some ideas that are connected to it, or tell me the background about it, or what the purpose of it is, or why you think it's so important. The question is really, give me some reasons. And this is going to be consistent. This is part of the reason I'm talking to you about these ideas and trying to get deeper into your answer when I ask you a question, is because this is part of being an English major, is that you should always try and provide reasons, because your professors are always going to want you to explain and analyze and go deeper. And the question why you are saying something or doing something or criticizing something needs to be explained in more depth, and that will be helpful to you in every class that you have, not just mine. So that is the lecture for tonight. I hope that everything is going well, and please remember that this Friday you have to show up and log in through the CNU portal, and you have to make sure that you get your credit for the makeup lecture. And as I said, next week is business as usual. Okay, so that's all for today, and I will see you this weekend. Thank you, and have a good night.